Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Dani, and today I'm going to tell you the worst and the most disappointing books that I've read in 2020. Quick disclaimer, because we need it. There are some books here that you probably loved. There are some books here that if you haven't read, you probably will love. So just because I didn't like them, just because they didn't fit my very specific reading tastes, doesn't mean they're bad books. Doesn't mean that the author is a bad author at all by any means. Doesn't mean that I would never read by this author before. I'm not talking about authors here. I'm talking about specific books that were not what I expected them to be. I expected to love them because I read them expecting to enjoy what I was reading, and I didn't for different reasons. And you might really love these books, which is totally okay. So please don't feel like I'm saying your favorite book is bad and that means that your tastes are wrong, because there's no such thing. So I really only have 4 books that I put in the worst of the year. All the other ones are just disappointing reads. So some I might even have given 4 stars to, but I expected it to be 5 stars and something was disappointing. So I have 2 books that I gave 1 star to, and the first one is 7 Days by Patrick Senecal. This is a horror graphic torture scenes book that I expected to be more of a thriller and we want to find out something, but there was basically no plot for me in this book. It was very, very graphic. There were some metaphors, not even metaphors, like direct comparisons in this book that I didn't like, that I didn't think was done well. But I did read this for a book club and other people enjoyed it much more than me. Well, it's easy to have enjoyed it much more than me, but people did enjoy this book. So it might just be that I don't care about this type of horror, but for me it was just, there was no point to this whole book except graphic torture scenes, and I just did not enjoy it at all. Then the second book that I gave 1 star to was The Jet Setters by Amanda Erie Ward. I read this because it was on the Reese Witherspoon book club, so clearly other people loved it. A lot of people read it and enjoyed it and discussed it at the time when this was chosen for that book club. And I really, really didn't like this. I didn't understand the point of the story. I didn't know if it was supposed to be a drama or a comedy. I think that there were a lot of very problematic things here that weren't dealt with. There were some very heavy topics that were just, I don't know if it was trying to be funny, but I just thought it was problematic on the way that it was dealt. There were things about the past of the characters that again was not addressed in the book, and I was just very uncomfortable by what they were talking about and what was happening. And this was supposed to be a travel novel. They're like, cruise on Europe, and they just really don't care at all about any of the travel stuff. It was very inconsistent, the way that they kept talking about, oh, I want to see this country, and then they were there and they just didn't care about seeing anything on the places they were traveling. It was just very confusing, uncomfortable, and I really didn't like it. So I know a lot of people also follow Reese Witherspoon Book Club, and if you did read this book, I hope you loved it, but I just did not. And then I have 2 other books that are in my worst of the year, and they're both romances. We know that I don't read romance, but I wanted to try some that were very highly rated. A lot of people said a lot of great things about them, so I wanted to try them out, and I didn't like them. So the first one is One Day in December by Josie Silver, and the reason why I didn't like this book was because the whole relationship between every character in this book, friendship or romantic relationships, are all based on lies, and they're all lying to each other the whole time, and that's not addressed so much. So it's not about the romance. I thought it would be a fun, light-hearted read, and it was just full-on lying, and I didn't like the way the story went from there, because I think that the lying stuff should have been dealt with better, and just not for me. I just can't. Like, when the whole relationship is based on a lie, it's just not real to me anymore, so I couldn't care about relationships between any of these characters, friendship or romantic. Then the other romance that I gave 2 stars to was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is the Brazilian edition, I read it in Portuguese, and the reason why I hated this one, again, it was not about the romance. It was because it is an office relationship, like they work together and they start a relationship, and it's just so wrong. There's just so much workplace harassment that happens here that the company doesn't care about, and I think that was the point of the book, was not for that to be talked about, but for me it was just really wrong. The characters were just very immature. They were not behaving like normal people. There was a lot of unacceptable behavior that did not get addressed in this book. And this is supposed to be a hate to love romance and enemies to lovers romance, but I don't understand why they hate. Like, there's no real reason why they hate each other. It's just stated in the book that that's a thing, and they hate each other, but they don't even hate each other in a believable way. So I was very confused. I did not like it. I was uncomfortable by a lot of the situations that were happening in the workplace here, so nope, didn't like it. I'm sure, and I will keep trying to read some romance that don't have this type of problematic situations, and I'm sure I will find them. I'm sure I will. It's not that I didn't like the romance aspect. I enjoyed reading a more fun and just light read. It's just I couldn't get past those situations in these 2 books. And now let's get into the disappointing books. I'm going to start with my highest rated book on this pile, which is the one 4-star book that I have here, and I will explain why it was disappointing. Don't be mad at me. It's not a bad book. It's a good book. A lot of people love it, so don't be mad at me. And that is The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue by V. Schwab. I love the premise of this book. I really enjoyed like the first half of it. I was completely immersed. I was loving it. I love the characters, especially Henry. I think it was beautifully written. It's a slow story, but in this case, I didn't mind. I was just there with the characters, and it was just a sad story that made me happy for some reason. It's like I wanted to keep reading it. About like 2/3 of the book, it was a complete 5 stars. I was loving it. It was perfect. But then we got a shift in the story, in the focus of the story, to in a way that I didn't know that that's where we were going, and I just didn't like it. I wanted to keep loving this book, but the way that it changed in the end, I hated it because I was loving it so much, and I didn't want that to happen, and I didn't think it made sense. I guess a lot of people enjoyed what happened, but there was also another decision more towards the end that it is a trope that I don't like in books or movies, and I can't say what it is because it would be a spoiler, but it was just that just kept dropping the rating for me and dropping my enjoyment of the book. In the second half also we had some flashbacks that were starting to get very repetitive, and there was no point anymore to them for me. So it was almost a complete perfect book, but then the ending, the way that things wrapped up in the end, just disappointed me so much. And I'm really sad that happened because it's beautifully written. I would definitely 100% recommend this book. It almost was everything that I needed, and then it ruined it in the end. And now we have just a big pile of books that I just hoped more. I hoped it would be more than it was, probably because of the hype, probably because of the premise or something like that, and then something happened that it didn't work for me. So the first one is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I didn't like the writing in this book. I thought it was overly complicated was just trying to say big, pretty words that was just making it very slow for me to read. I really loved the premise. I didn't like the ending. I thought it ended too fast and there was way too much story for not enough payoff. So it disappointed me. Then we have A Stranger in the House by Cheryl Pena, which is an author that also wrote one of my favorite books that I read in 2020. But this one was disappointing because it just not a lot happened after like the half point of the book. We pretty much had all figured out, and there's nowhere else for the story to go. So I was bored through half of this book. Then we have This Lie Will Kill You by Chelsea Pitcher, which is a YA thriller. And I really enjoyed maybe the first half of it because I didn't read it as a thriller. I read it as a parody of thrillers maybe. I thought it was very funny and exaggerated and it was just way over the top. But I was enjoying it. But then we got some problematic situations that weren't addressed and I just couldn't get into what was happening in the story anymore, and it just ruined it for me because I wanted at least those things to be addressed and to be talked about, but we didn't get that. So it ended up disappointing me. The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I had extremely high expectations for this book. I thought it would be a 5 stars. And I really love the idea of it, but everyone can hear each other's thoughts. And I like the sci-fi dystopia things in here, the universe that he created. But I just felt like the characters had no motivation. They didn't know why they were doing the things they were doing. The bad guys were too stereotypical. They were bad just for being bad. And overall, I just didn't see the point of this whole story because I don't know what the characters were trying to do throughout the whole novel. But I am very excited for the movie. I think it's very fast-paced and it has the potential to be a very fun movie. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, a favorite of a lot of people. I did not get it. I wanted to love it, but again, another book that I don't see the point. Very whimsical, very magical, but it's basically a description of a place rather than a story with actual plot. So maybe I read it at the wrong time. I just don't know what the point of the book was. And I know a lot of people love this book for the atmosphere and for the writing, and I completely agree that is phenomenal atmosphere and writing. It was just not enough for me. So it was really disappointing. God is in the Machine by Laura Bass Johnson. This was disappointing to me because it's a YA sci-fi that had so much potential. I thought it was going to go so well. In the end, I just didn't like the characters too much. I thought it was very surface level for what it could have been. I didn't get some of the decisions that were made here, and I actually, when I read it, I thought it was a standalone, which I would have enjoyed more, but apparently there will be a sequel, and I think it would have been better just if it stayed as it is, unless some of those things get better in the second book. But I don't know if I'm going to continue. I just thought the premise was too good for the way the story unraveled. Again, please don't be mad at me, but now we have Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I forgot that I read this book this year. I thought it was last year, but when I was looking at my list, I read it this year, so I guess it's here. This was disappointing to me mostly because of the hype. I expected so much more for how much people love it, and I just... Okay, I have to say, I don't like these characters. I don't think they behave their age. I love the Grisha trilogy so much more than this. This doesn't have fantasy enough for me. I think it tries to be a fantasy book, but it doesn't have a lot of the fantasy elements. And I was just very disappointed because I thought this was supposed to be one of the best books that everyone in BookTube recommends. And obviously, it cannot be for everyone, because if someone could write a book that everyone is going to love, they would have written that already, and that still hasn't happened. So I am one of the people who were disappointed about this book, and I just didn't think it was all that. Dragon Ball by Akira Toriyama. I got this book on a sale and I was really excited because I started to read Fullmetal Alchemist this year, which is in my favorite books of the year. And I was excited to get into Dragon Ball because the idea, it also sounds really cool. And the reason why it was disappointing to me was because it's just very sexist and there's a lot of sexual elements that just didn't need to be here. I like this story, I like the idea of this book, and I like the plot, but it just disappointed me because I couldn't get past those things and they just distracted me from the plot. So I don't know, I'd still be interested in continuing because I'm curious to know what happens, but it's just very much what you would expect from an older manga series written by white men with a lot of sexual things, a lot of sexualized characters. So that was disappointing to me because I wanted to love it as much as I love Fullmetal. And then the last book that was disappointing to me this year is not a surprise, I don't think, because a lot of people were disappointed by this book, and it is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to The Hunger Games, which is one of my all-time favorite series, and this tells the story of President Snow when he was a child in the 10th Hunger Games, and I just don't see the point of this book existing. The interesting parts about this book were the actual Hunger Games and seeing how it evolved to what we know in the Hunger Games trilogy. It's just so interesting. I think there were a lot of small details that she put in this book to show how it evolved. But the actual story, I don't care. I do not sympathize with the character at all. Like, I don't care about him. I knew he was going to do well in life after this because we know him later in life, so I just did not care about him. The other main character that we get here, which is the girl participating in the Hunger Games, I really like her, but I don't think she was explored enough, and I don't get, I thought it was inconsistent with the trilogy. Some things just didn't make sense the way that it should have. And like a lot of people, I would much rather have an encyclopedia about the Hunger Games or a history book about all the Hunger Games than this. I don't know if it's going to be a series, if it's going to continue. I don't know that I would continue reading it. And again, like a lot of people, I would rather have gotten the perspective of Max, which was what we expected when this was first announced, than President Snow. Please let me know what are some books that disappointed you in 2020 or that were just the worst books you read in the year. I'm so curious to know. You can tell me if it's one of my favorite books. It's okay, people have different tastes. I hope I didn't hurt anyone's feelings too much. Like I said, it's just my opinion. It's not universal truth. So it's totally okay if you love all of these books. But that was it. Remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for joining me.